Hi, I'm Elena Blackwood. While I was in the hospital giving birth, my sister accidentally burned my custom maternity dress with a candle, thinking she'd taught me a lesson about knowing my place. What she didn't know was that my husband Marcus owns the largest insurance investigation firm in the Pacific Northwest, and her little accident was about to expose 15 years of theft and lies that would cost her everything.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
The dress wasn't just fabric and thread. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd become, and everything I was about to bring into the world. I'd spent months designing it with Isabella Chen, Portland's most sought-after maternity couturier, who specialized in creating gowns that made expectant mothers feel radiant rather than hidden. The dress was ethereal blue silk with hand-embroidered silver threads that caught light like moonbeams on water. The bodice was tailored to embrace my changing figure, while the flowing skirt created an elegant silhouette that made me feel like a goddess rather than someone whose body was no longer her own. Every detail was intentional, from the delicate pearl buttons to the subtle way the fabric gathered beneath my growing belly. This wasn't vanity. After months of morning sickness, swollen ankles, and clothes that no longer fit, this dress was my armor for the most important event of my life, the charity gala where Marcus and I would announce our pregnancy to Portland's elite social circle. The Autumn Foundation Gala was where the city's most influential families gathered to support children's hospitals, and this year, we were the guest speakers. I'd been planning this moment for weeks. The announcement would coincide with our donation of $500,000 to establish the Blackwood Children's Wing at Oregon Health and Science University. The dress was meant to be photographed, featured in Portland Society magazine, and preserved as a memento of the night we shared our joy with the world. Growing up as the younger daughter in the Morrison family meant I was always compared to my sister Victoria, who seemed to excel at everything effortlessly. She was valedictorian while I struggled with dyslexia. She married her college sweetheart at 22 while I focused on building my nonprofit career. She had 3 children by 30 while I spent years wondering if motherhood would ever happen for me. When I finally met Marcus at a fundraising event 3 years ago, everything changed. He was successful, kind, and completely uninterested in the social climbing that obsessed my family. As CEO of Blackwood Investigations, he'd built a reputation for solving complex insurance fraud cases that other firms couldn't crack. His clients included Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and anyone who needed the truth uncovered with surgical precision. Our wedding was elegant but understated, exactly what we both wanted. But I could see the jealousy in Victoria's eyes as she watched me marry someone whose success dwarfed her husband's middle management position at a local bank. She'd spent years being the family's golden child, and suddenly I had something she couldn't claim, a partnership with someone who was both powerful and genuinely devoted to me. The pregnancy had been our private joy for months. At 34, I'd begun to worry that motherhood might not be possible. So when those 2 lines appeared on the test, Marcus and I cried together in our bathroom like we'd received a miracle. We waited until the second trimester to tell anyone, savoring the secret knowledge that our family was about to grow. The dress represented all of it. My journey to love, my path to motherhood, and my emergence from Victoria's shadow into my own life. What I didn't know was that Victoria had been watching, calculating, and planning to remind me exactly where she thought I belonged.
Victoria had always been the perfect older sister on the surface, protective, involved, and seemingly supportive of everything I did. When I announced my pregnancy at our family's monthly dinner, she was the first to jump up and hug me, tears in her eyes as she whispered how happy she was that I was finally getting everything I dreamed of. Elena, this is such wonderful news, she'd said, holding my hands across the dining table. You're going to be an amazing mother. I can't wait to help you with everything. And help she did. Victoria threw herself into my pregnancy with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely cared about my happiness. She researched the best obstetricians in Portland, sent me articles about prenatal nutrition, and even offered to host my baby shower at her sprawling Lake Oswego home. You shouldn't stress about planning anything right now, she insisted during one of our weekly coffee dates. Your only job is to stay healthy and happy. Let me handle all the details. Victoria knew about the dress from the very beginning. I'd been so excited about the design process that I'd shared every detail with her. The silk sourcing, the embroidery patterns, even the multiple fittings required to accommodate my changing body. She'd driven me to appointments with Isabella Chen, offering opinions on color choices and design elements. That shade of blue is perfect with your complexion, she'd said, watching Isabella pin the bodice during my final fitting. You're going to look absolutely radiant at the gala. What I didn't realize was how carefully she was cataloging every detail of my life. Victoria knew my schedule better than I did. When Marcus traveled for business, when I had doctor's appointments, when I stayed late at the nonprofit office. She'd developed a habit of dropping by unannounced, always with some thoughtful excuse. I brought you that prenatal tea you mentioned, she'd say, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her for emergencies, and I picked up those magazines you wanted. Victoria was there when I received the invitation to speak at the Autumn Foundation Gala. She watched me open the formal envelope, saw my excitement as I read the details, and listened as I explained how meaningful it would be to announce our pregnancy at an event dedicated to children's health care. What an honor, she'd said, but something flickered behind her eyes that I was too trusting to recognize. You'll be the center of attention that night. She knew about our planned donation to establish the children's wing. She'd been sitting in my kitchen when Marcus called to confirm the final details with the hospital's development office. She'd heard me schedule the photographer for the gala, watched me coordinate with Portland Society magazine for the feature article about prominent families supporting children's health care. Most importantly, Victoria knew exactly how much the dress meant to me. She'd seen me try it on during the final fitting, watched tears gather in my eyes as I looked at myself in Isabella's mirror. She'd heard me tell Marcus that wearing the dress made me feel like I was finally becoming the woman I was meant to be. It's not just a dress, I'd confided to her one afternoon as we sat in my living room, the garment hanging carefully in my bedroom upstairs. It represents everything: my marriage, the baby, the new chapter we're starting. I want to preserve it after the gala, maybe even pass it down someday. Victoria had nodded sympathetically, asking questions about preservation methods and storage techniques. I thought she was being the thoughtful sister she'd always appeared to be. I had no idea she was gathering intelligence for the most calculated act of cruelty I'd ever experienced. What I also didn't know was that Victoria had been struggling with her own marriage for months. Her husband David's drinking had gotten worse after his third promotion rejection at the bank. Their finances were strained from trying to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Most painfully, Victoria had suffered 2 miscarriages in the past year while watching me achieve the effortless pregnancy that had eluded her. My happiness had become her torment, and she'd decided it was time to restore the natural order.
The contractions started at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before my due date. Marcus was in Seattle for a client emergency, but he caught the first flight back while I labored through the longest night of my life. By the time he burst through the hospital doors, I was already in transition, and our daughter Sophia arrived just 40 minutes later. The birth was intense, but beautiful. Everything I'd hoped for except the timing. The Autumn Foundation Gala was scheduled for Saturday evening, just 4 days away.
I'd planned to announce our pregnancy that night, but instead we'd be introducing our perfect early daughter to the world.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The dress still fits, I told Marcus as we marveled at Sophia sleeping in my arms. Isabella designed it with extra room, anticipating I might be even bigger by the gala date. We can still make our announcement, just with a surprise addition. Marcus was hesitant about me attending an event so soon after giving birth, but I was determined. This was our moment. The culmination of months of planning, the perfect opportunity to share our joy while supporting a cause we believed in. Victoria can help with Sophia during the event, I suggested. She's been so excited about becoming an aunt, and she knows how important this night is to us. The plan was simple. Victoria would come to our house Saturday afternoon to help me get ready and then accompany us to the gala as Sophia's designated caretaker. She could watch the baby during our speech and the formal photos, ensuring we could fully participate in the evening while keeping our daughter close. Friday morning, still glowing from the euphoria of new motherhood, I called Victoria to confirm the arrangement. Her voice sounded strange, distant and strained, but I attributed it to exhaustion. She had been visiting the hospital every day since Sophia's birth, bringing flowers and offering to help with anything we needed. "Of course I'll be there," she said. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. Why don't I come over this afternoon to help you prepare? We can make sure everything is perfect for tomorrow night." That afternoon, Victoria arrived at our house with her usual thoughtfulness: a casserole for dinner, fresh flowers for the nursery, and a bottle of champagne to celebrate Sophia's arrival. She seemed more like herself, cooing over the baby and insisting I rest while she tidied the house. "Where's the dress?" she asked, surveying my bedroom. "I want to see it one more time before the big night." I showed her to the guest room where the gown hung in pristine condition, protected by a breathable garment bag. Victoria examined it carefully, running her fingers over the silk and admiring Isabella's craftsmanship. "It's even more beautiful than I remembered. You're going to look absolutely perfect." I went to bed that night feeling grateful for my sister's support and excited about sharing our announcement with Portland's philanthropic community. Sophia slept peacefully in her bassinet beside our bed while Marcus held my hand, both of us overwhelmed by how quickly our lives had transformed. The phone call came at 6:30 a.m. Victoria's voice was hysterical, barely comprehensible through her sobs. "Elena, I'm so sorry. There's been an accident. I came over early to help you get ready, and I lit some candles in the guest room to make it smell nice for when you put on the dress. The wind from the open window, the curtain caught on fire and spread so quickly. I tried to save it, but the dress... Oh God, Elena, the dress is gone." I couldn't process her words at first. The dress was gone? The gown I'd spent months designing? The centerpiece of tonight's announcement? The symbol of everything beautiful in my life? I called the fire department, but by the time they arrived, the whole room was destroyed. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I know how much it meant to you." Marcus found me sitting on our bedroom floor 20 minutes later, still holding the phone, staring at nothing while Sophia cried in her bassinet. I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't understand how something so perfect could disappear so completely. Victoria arrived at our house within an hour, her face streaked with tears and her clothes smelling of smoke. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing about how sorry she was, how she'd never forgive herself for being so careless. "I just wanted everything to be perfect for you," she wailed. "I thought the candles would make the room smell beautiful when you got dressed. I never imagined... Elena, I'm so sorry. I know how much that dress meant to you." Marcus stood in our doorway holding Sophia, watching Victoria's performance with the first flicker of suspicion I'd ever seen in his eyes. But I was too devastated to notice. The dress was gone, the gala was that evening, and I had nothing to wear to the most important announcement of our lives. "We can find you something else," Victoria said, wiping her eyes. "There are beautiful stores downtown. We'll find something even better." But there was nothing better. The dress had been custom-made for my body, my story, my moment. Every downtown boutique we visited felt like a mockery of what I'd lost. The salespeople were sympathetic but helpless. No one had formal maternity wear suitable for a gala in my size available that same day. "Maybe this is a sign," Victoria said gently as we returned empty-handed. You just gave birth 4 days ago. Maybe you should rest tonight and make the announcement at a different event." The suggestion felt like another betrayal. This was our moment, the culmination of months of planning. But without the dress, without the perfect presentation I'd envisioned, the announcement felt hollow. That evening, Marcus and I attended the gala and borrowed formal wear. His backup tuxedo and a simple black dress Victoria had found in her own closet that barely fit my post-pregnancy body. I felt invisible, unremarkable, nothing like the radiant, expectant mother I'd planned to be. During our speech, I mentioned Sophia's early arrival and our donation to the children's wing, but the magic was gone. The photographs captured a tired new mother in an ill-fitting dress, rather than the glowing announcement I'd imagined. Portland Society magazine ran a small paragraph about our donation, but there was no feature article, no celebration of our growing family. Over the following weeks, Victoria's story became more elaborate with each telling. She'd arrived early to surprise me with breakfast in bed. She'd lit candles throughout the house to create a spa-like atmosphere for my preparation. The wind had been unusually strong that morning, catching the guest room curtains and spreading the fire faster than she could react. "I have burns on my hands from trying to save the dress," she told our mother, showing off small red marks that could have come from anything. I risked my life trying to preserve something I knew Elena treasured. When I began asking specific questions about the fire, Victoria became defensive. "Elena, honey, I know you're grieving, but I'm grieving too. I feel terrible about what happened. Questioning me like this isn't going to bring the dress back." She started suggesting my attachment to the dress was unhealthy, that perhaps losing it was actually a blessing in disguise. "You're a mother now," she said during one particularly painful conversation. "Maybe it's time to focus on what really matters instead of obsessing over material things." The narrative she was creating painted me as shallow and unreasonable, while positioning herself as the devoted sister who'd suffered alongside me. Our parents began encouraging me to forget and move on, suggesting that Victoria had been punished enough by her guilt. But Marcus wasn't buying any of it. 3 weeks after the fire, he pulled me aside with a question that changed everything. "Elena," he said quietly, "has Victoria ever asked you about our insurance policies?"
Marcus's question hit me like a physical blow. Victoria asking about our insurance? I searched my memory, trying to recall conversations that had seemed innocent at the time, but might have been something more calculated. "Actually, yes," I said slowly. "About 2 months ago, she asked about our homeowner's policy. She said David was reviewing their coverage and wanted to compare our rates." Marcus nodded grimly. "What else did she ask about?" The memories came flooding back. Victoria's casual questions about our security system, whether we had cameras, how often we updated our insurance appraisals. She'd been particularly interested in my jewelry coverage after seeing my engagement ring appraised for our policy renewal. She asked if we insured individual items separately, I remembered. I told her about the dress being added to our personal property coverage because of its custom value. How much was it insured for? $15,000. Isabella documented every detail. The silk, the hand embroidery, the design time. Our agent said it qualified as a unique art piece. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that changed everything. He calls his office. "Rebecca, I need you to run a background check on Victoria Morrison Campbell. Full financial workup, credit history, insurance claims for the past 5 years. Yes, I know she's Elena's sister. That's exactly why I need this information." I wanted to protest, to defend Victoria, but something deep in my gut had shifted. The woman who'd raised me, protected me, seemed to care about my happiness. Could she really have destroyed the most important dress of my life for insurance money? "Marcus, maybe we're being paranoid," I said weakly. "Elena, I've spent 15 years investigating insurance fraud. I've learned to recognize patterns. Victoria's behavior fits a very specific profile." Over the next 48 hours, Marcus treated Victoria's accident like the complex investigation it was.
He photographed the guest room damage, noting how the fire had been contained to exactly the area where my dress hung. He reviewed our security system footage, discovering that Victoria had disabled the smoke detectors in that room 3 days before the fire. She knew exactly what she was doing, he explained, showing me the evidence. She wanted a fire that would destroy the dress completely, but not damage the rest of the house. No casualties, no major structural damage, just enough destruction to eliminate what she wanted gone. But the most damning evidence came from Rebecca's background check. Victoria and David were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments behind, David's gambling addiction draining their savings faster than his bank salary could replenish it. More importantly, Victoria had filed 3 separate insurance claims in the past 18 months: a stolen diamond bracelet during a family vacation, an accidental water damage to her designer handbag collection, and a mysterious break-in that had destroyed only her most expensive electronics while leaving obvious valuables untouched. She'd been running small-scale insurance scams for over a year. Each claim was under $10,000, small enough to avoid serious scrutiny, but large enough to keep them afloat financially. The pattern was clear. Victoria had been using insurance fraud to maintain their lifestyle, while David's drinking and gambling destroyed their finances. But destroying my dress wasn't about money. The insurance payout would go to us, not her. This wasn't financial, I realized. This was personal. Marcus nodded. She wanted to hurt you. The question is why and whether we can prove it. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was done being Victoria's victim. I was done accepting her lies and manipulation. I was done protecting someone who had deliberately destroyed the most meaningful possession of my life. What do we need to prove she did this intentionally? I asked. Marcus smiled. Leave that to me.
Marcus had built Blackwood Investigations by understanding one fundamental truth. People who commit crimes always leave traces. They might think they've covered their tracks, but there's always evidence if you know where to look and how to find it. Victoria made 3 critical mistakes, he explained as we sat in his office Sunday morning while Sophia napped in her carrier. She disabled the smoke detectors. She used accelerant to ensure complete destruction of the dress, and she underestimated how thoroughly I document everything in our home. Marcus pulled up security footage from our neighbor's Ring doorbell camera, which captured the side of our house. The timestamp showed Victoria arriving at 5:47 a.m. on Saturday, nearly an hour before she claimed to have come over to help me prepare. She needed time to set up the scene, Marcus said. This wasn't a spontaneous accident. This was premeditated destruction. But video evidence of early arrival wasn't enough to prove intentional arson. We needed more concrete proof of her planning and motivation. That's when Marcus revealed the full scope of his investigation strategy. I'm going to give Victoria exactly what she wants: an opportunity to confess. The plan was elegant in its psychological precision. Marcus would approach Victoria not as an accusatory brother-in-law, but as a concerned family member worried about her recent behavior. He'd mentioned that our insurance company was conducting a routine investigation of the fire, as they did with all claims over $10,000. Insurance investigators will want to interview everyone who is present. They'll review financial records, cross-reference stories, maybe even bring in arson specialists if they find anything suspicious. The goal wasn't to threaten Victoria, but to create enough anxiety that she'd either confess or make additional mistakes we could document. Marcus had seen this approach work dozens of times with insurance fraud cases. Guilty parties often revealed themselves when they believed investigators were closing in. What if she doesn't break? I asked. Then we moved to phase 2, Marcus replied, pulling out a file that made my stomach clench. We expose the pattern. Marcus had been busy documenting not just Victoria's recent insurance claims, but her entire history of manipulation and deceit within our family. He'd interviewed our parents about financial help they'd given Victoria over the years, supposedly for emergencies that always seemed to happen right before major family events. She borrowed $3,000 from your parents right before your engagement party. He showed me the bank records our father had reluctantly provided. Another $5,000 before your wedding. Each time she claimed David's job was in jeopardy or they had unexpected medical expenses. More disturbing was the pattern of sabotage Marcus had uncovered. My college graduation party had been ruined when Victoria accidentally gave several guests food poisoning with her contribution to the potluck. My first apartment had been burglarized the week before my housewarming party, with thieves somehow knowing exactly where I kept my valuables. She's been undermining your successes for years, Marcus said. The dress fire was just the most extreme example. But Marcus's most brilliant strategic move was leveraging his professional reputation. As CEO of the Northwest's largest insurance investigation firm, he had relationships with every major insurance company in the region. When our claim was filed, he personally requested that the case be handled by Sarah Chen, the most thorough arson investigator in Oregon. Sarah owes me favors from previous cases, Marcus explained. She'll conduct the most comprehensive investigation possible. If there's any evidence of intentional fire setting, she'll find it. The psychological pressure on Victoria would be immense. She'd know that one of the region's top investigators was examining every detail of her story, looking for inconsistencies, reviewing evidence with the kind of expertise that had sent dozens of insurance fraudsters to prison. We're going to give her one chance to tell the truth, Marcus said. After that, we let the evidence speak for itself.
Marcus invited Victoria to lunch 3 days later, choosing a quiet restaurant where their conversation could be recorded without drawing attention. I stayed home with Sophia, monitoring everything through the wireless microphone Marcus wore, my heart pounding as I listened to him execute the plan we'd rehearsed. "Victoria, I wanted to talk to you about the fire," Marcus began after they'd ordered. "The insurance company is asking some detailed questions, and I want to make sure we're all prepared for their investigation." I could hear the tension in Victoria's voice immediately. "What kind of questions? I already told them everything I know." "Standard procedure for any claim over $10,000, Marcus said casually. "They'll want to review the timeline, examine the physical evidence, maybe bring in a specialist to determine how the fire started and spread." There was a long pause. Then Victoria asked the question that revealed everything. "What kind of specialist?" "An arson investigator, Sarah Chen from Pacific Northwest Insurance Forensics. She's the best in the region, worked on some major cases I've handled, very thorough." I could practically hear Victoria's panic through the microphone. She knew that name. Anyone who'd researched insurance fraud in Oregon would know Sarah Chen's reputation for uncovering the truth. "Is that really necessary?" Victoria asked, trying to sound confused rather than terrified. "It was obviously an accident. I was there. I saw what happened." "Of course," Marcus agreed, "but Sarah will want to verify every detail. Timeline, accelerant patterns, smoke detector functionality. She'll probably want to interview you several times, review your financial records, check for any history of similar incidents." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Then Victoria made her first crucial mistake. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The fire? It wasn't exactly how I described it." My breath caught. She was going to confess. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his tone carefully neutral. "I did light candles, but not for ambiance. I was angry. Elena has everything. The perfect husband, the perfect life, the perfect pregnancy. I've been struggling so much with David's drinking and our finances, and seeing her so happy while I'm falling apart, I just wanted to take something away from her." The words poured out like poison from a wound. Victoria admitted to arriving early, to deliberately placing candles near the dress, to using nail polish remover she'd brought specifically to accelerate the fire. She had disabled the smoke detectors 3 days earlier during a visit when I was napping. "I told myself it was just a dress," she continued, sobbing now. "I thought maybe the insurance money would help you move on, focus on being a mother instead of obsessing over material things. But I knew, God, Marcus, I knew how much it meant to her."
Marcus let her cry for a moment before asking the question that would seal her fate. Victoria, Elena knows. The gasp that came through the microphone was pure terror. What do you mean? She knows about your financial problems, your insurance claims, and she knows you destroyed her dress intentionally. The question now is what we do about it.
Victoria arrived at our house that evening looking like she'd aged 10 years in the span of 6 hours. Her usual perfect makeup was smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her hands shook as she rang our doorbell. Marcus answered while I waited in the living room, holding Sophia like a shield against the confrontation I'd been dreading. "Elena, please," Victoria said as she entered, her voice raw from crying. "Marcus told me you know everything. I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "Explain how you've been stealing from insurance companies for over a year? Explain how you deliberately burned the most important dress of my life? Explain how you've been sabotaging my happiness since college?" Victoria's face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you this much. I thought you'd just buy another dress." "It was custom-made, Victoria. There is no other dress. There's no replacing months of design work, the fittings, the meaning behind every detail. You didn't just burn fabric, you destroyed a piece of my story." Marcus handed me a file folder containing everything he'd uncovered about Victoria's pattern of deception. Bank records showing her desperate financial situation, insurance claims that revealed her systematic fraud, even testimony from our parents about the money they'd unknowingly given her to fund David's gambling addiction. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd prosecuted dozens of insurance fraud cases. "You're going to confess to all of your fraudulent claims and pay full restitution. You're going to enter counseling for your compulsive behavior, and you're going to stay away from Elena and our family until you can prove you've changed." "But I'm her sister," Victoria protested weakly. "Sisters don't destroy each other's most precious possessions out of jealousy. Sisters don't steal money and blame their victims for being materialistic. Sisters don't spend years undermining someone's achievements because they can't handle their own failures." The consequences Marcus had orchestrated were swift and comprehensive. By the end of the week, Victoria had been arrested on multiple counts of insurance fraud. The evidence Marcus had gathered made prosecution inevitable. Recorded confessions, financial records, and testimony from multiple victims of her schemes. David filed for divorce the moment he learned about Victoria's crimes, claiming he had no knowledge of her fraudulent activities. Their Lake Owasco house went into foreclosure, and Victoria was forced to move into a studio apartment while awaiting trial. But the social consequences were perhaps more devastating than the legal ones. Portland's tight-knit philanthropic community ostracized Victoria completely once news of her arrest became public. The same social circle she'd worked so hard to impress now viewed her as a criminal who'd betrayed the trust of family and friends. Meanwhile, the story of my destroyed dress and Marcus's investigation had captured the attention of local media. Portland Society magazine ran a feature about insurance fraud and wealthy families, using Victoria's case as a cautionary tale about jealousy and financial desperation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Victoria had destroyed my dress to prevent me from being the center of attention at the Autumn Foundation Gala, but her crimes had made me the focus of far more publicity than any charity event could have generated. Isabella Chen, moved by the story, offered to recreate my dress free of charge. Quote, "Some things are too beautiful to let jealousy destroy permanently. Let's make something even more magnificent." End quote. The new dress was indeed more beautiful than the original, incorporating elements that reflected not just my pregnancy journey, but my strength in overcoming betrayal. This time, when I wore it to the winter charity ball 6 months later, it represented not just motherhood and love, but resilience and justice. 2 years after Victoria's sentencing, I stood in the newly opened Blackwood Center for Family Justice,
watching dozens of families receive legal assistance they couldn't otherwise afford. The center was housed in a beautiful restored Victorian mansion in Portland's Pearl District, its elegant rooms now serving as consultation spaces for domestic violence survivors, insurance fraud victims, and families torn apart by financial crimes. The irony of our success wasn't lost on me. Victoria's attempt to destroy my happiness had inadvertently launched the most meaningful chapter of our lives. The insurance payout from my destroyed dress, combined with the restitution Victoria was required to pay, had provided the initial funding for Marcus to expand Blackwood Investigations into something much larger than a traditional private investigation firm. We realized there was a gap in the system, Marcus explained to the Portland Tribune reporter who was writing a feature about our center. Wealthy criminals like Victoria often target family members because they know victims are reluctant to prosecute. We wanted to create a place where people could get justice regardless of their relationship to the perpetrator. The Blackwood Center had processed over 300 cases in its first 18 months of operation. Insurance fraud, embezzlement by family members, domestic financial abuse, inheritance theft, crimes that often went unreported because victims felt ashamed or conflicted about pursuing charges against relatives. Our most significant case had been the Morrison Family Trust Fund scandal. During Victoria's investigation, Marcus had uncovered evidence that our Uncle Richard had been embezzling from our grandmother's estate for over a decade. The discovery led to a federal investigation that recovered nearly $2 million in stolen assets and sent Richard to prison for 15 years. Your sister's crimes opened a door we never knew existed, the FBI agent had told me during Richard's sentencing. Her case gave us the framework to understand how financial abuse operates within wealthy families. The success of the center had brought opportunities I never could have imagined. Harvard Law School invited me to speak about family financial crimes. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners asked Marcus to help develop new protocols for investigating claims involving family members. We'd been featured in Time magazine's People Who Changed America issue. But the most satisfying transformation was personal. Sophia was now a bright, curious 2-year-old who filled our lives with joy and laughter. She had no memory of the chaos surrounding her birth, no knowledge of the aunt who tried to destroy her parents' happiness. To her, our family was strong, loving, and unbreakable. The new dress Isabella had created for me had become something of a legend in Portland's fashion and philanthropic circles. I'd worn it to dozens of events over the past 2 years, each time telling the story of how art and beauty could triumph over jealousy and destruction. Isabella had photographed the dress for Vogue's Resilience issue, turning it into a symbol of strength emerging from betrayal.
That dress represents everything your sister couldn't destroy, Isabella told me during Sophia's second birthday party. Your grace, your strength, your refusal to let bitterness define your future. The financial impact of our success had been staggering. Blackwood Investigations was now valued at over $50 million, with offices in 12 states and a staff of nearly 200 investigators, attorneys, and support personnel. We'd recovered over $100 million in fraudulent claims and helped convict dozens of white-collar criminals who thought their family connections would protect them from consequences. Most importantly, we'd created a model that other cities were replicating. The Blackwood Center approach, combining investigation, legal advocacy, and emotional support for victims of family financial crimes, was being implemented in Chicago, Atlanta, and San Francisco. Marcus had been approached about running for Oregon Attorney General, a position that would allow him to implement statewide reforms in how family financial crimes were prosecuted. The irony was perfect. Victoria's attempt to diminish my importance accidentally launched Marcus into one of the most influential legal careers in the Pacific Northwest. Our parents, who had initially been devastated by Victoria's crimes and imprisonment, had eventually come to understand that our pursuit of justice had been necessary. They'd moved back to Portland and become active volunteers at the center, helping other families navigate the complex emotions of prosecuting relatives who'd betrayed their trust. I'm proud of what you've built from such a terrible situation, my father told me during one of our monthly dinners.
Victoria's actions were unforgivable, but your response has helped so many families find justice. The center had also attracted national attention from other victims of family financial abuse. We received letters from across the country. Adult children whose parents had stolen their college funds, spouses who'd discovered decades of hidden financial infidelity, siblings who'd been systematically cheated out of inheritances. "You gave us permission to fight back," one letter read. "Seeing you refuse to accept your sister's betrayal showed us that family loyalty doesn't mean tolerating criminal behavior." The speaking engagements, consulting opportunities, and book deals that followed had established me as a national expert on family financial abuse. My TEDx talk, "When Family Becomes the Enemy," had been viewed over 3 million times and translated into 15 languages. But perhaps the most meaningful triumph was simpler than all the professional success. Every morning, I woke up in a home built on truth rather than lies, surrounded by people who loved me genuinely rather than conditionally. Victoria's attempt to teach me my place had instead taught me my worth. The woman who'd tried to destroy my most precious possession had accidentally given me something far more valuable: the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for myself and compassionate enough to help others do the same.
Standing in my daughter's nursery 5 years later, holding the silk remnants of my original maternity dress that fire investigators had recovered from the guest room wreckage, I finally understood the gift Victoria had unknowingly given me. The charred fragments, carefully preserved in an evidence bag, represented more than destruction. They were proof of transformation. Sophia, now a precocious 5-year-old, discovered me examining the burned fabric one evening as I prepared for a speaking engagement at the National Conference on Family Financial Crimes. Her innocent question cut straight to the heart of everything I'd learned. "Mommy, why did Aunt Victoria burn your pretty dress?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my mind dozens of times, knowing that eventually I'd need to explain why Sophia had an aunt she'd never met, why certain family photos had been carefully edited, why we never talked about Daddy's investigation that had made us famous. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people get so unhappy with their own lives that they try to take away things that make other people happy," I said, sitting on her bedroom floor while she played with her dolls. Aunt Victoria was sad about her own problems, and instead of fixing them, she decided to hurt Mommy. "That's mean," Sophia said, with the clear moral judgment that only children possess. Yes, it was mean, but it also taught me something very important. What Victoria's betrayal had taught me was the difference between family and kinship. Family, I'd learned, wasn't determined by blood relations or shared DNA. Family was built on trust, support, and genuine love, qualities that Victoria had never actually possessed despite our genetic connection. The real family we'd built included Isabella Chen, who'd become Sophia's unofficial grandmother and my closest confidant, Dr. Sarah Kim, whose legal expertise had helped us develop the center's advocacy programs, Rebecca Martinez, Marcus's chief investigator, who'd become the sister Victoria had never truly been, dozens of staff members, clients, and supporters who'd created a chosen family based on shared values rather than inherited obligations. "The people who truly love you," I explained to Sophia, "would never deliberately hurt you to make themselves feel better. Real family protects each other, even when it's difficult."
The wisdom I'd gained from Victoria's betrayal extended far beyond personal relationships. In the hundreds of family financial abuse cases we'd handled at the center, I'd seen the same patterns repeated endlessly: denial, enabling, misplaced loyalty, and the devastating consequences of prioritizing family harmony over truth and justice. "One of the hardest lessons I've learned," I told the audience at the Denver Family Justice Summit, "is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family member is to hold them accountable for their actions. Enabling destructive behavior isn't compassion, it's cruelty disguised as kindness." The speech had become one of my most requested presentations, resonating with thousands of people who'd struggled with similar betrayals. The letters I received afterward always followed the same pattern: relief at being given permission to prioritize their own well-being over family expectations. "You saved my life," one woman wrote after attending a workshop in Seattle. "My brother had been stealing from my mother's retirement account for 3 years, and everyone in the family kept saying we shouldn't destroy the family by pressing charges. Your presentation gave me the strength to contact the police." But perhaps the most profound wisdom had come from understanding the psychology of Victoria's actions. Through years of therapy and consultation with forensic psychologists, I'd learned that her cruelty hadn't really been about me at all. It had been about her own sense of inadequacy, her inability to build genuine success, her desperate need to diminish others rather than elevate herself. Hurt people became one of the center's founding principles. But understanding someone's pain doesn't excuse their actions or oblige you to accept continued abuse. This perspective had transformed how we approached cases at the center. Instead of simply pursuing punishment for financial crimes, we worked to break cycles of family dysfunction that often spanned generations. We required counseling for both victims and perpetrators, created family mediation programs for cases involving restitution, and developed educational resources to help families recognize and prevent financial abuse. The success of this approach had attracted international attention. The Blackwood model was now being implemented in Canada, Australia, and several European countries. Marcus had been invited to address the United Nations about family financial crimes as a form of domestic violence. What started as one woman's jealousy, the UN representative had said in her introduction, became a global movement to protect families from financial predators. The ultimate irony of Victoria's actions was how completely they'd backfired. She tried to diminish my importance by destroying something meaningful to me. But her crime had made me more influential than I'd ever imagined possible. She'd attempted to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy, but her betrayal had elevated me to a position of national prominence in advocating for justice. Most importantly, Victoria had tried to steal my joy during one of the most meaningful moments of my life, becoming a mother. Instead, her actions had taught me that joy couldn't be destroyed by external forces if it was rooted in authentic love and purpose. Watching Sophia play in the nursery that had once been my own home office, surrounded by the awards and recognition that had grown from the ashes of Victoria's betrayal, I felt something I'd never expected to feel about my sister's actions. Gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain she'd caused, but gratitude for the strength I'd discovered within myself. Gratitude for the authentic family we'd built. Gratitude for the thousands of people who'd found justice through our work. Gratitude for learning that sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up giving us exactly what we need to become who we were always meant to be. The burned dress fragments went into Sophia's memory box that evening, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that some things are too strong to be destroyed by jealousy, too meaningful to be diminished by cruelty, and too beautiful to be erased by someone else's pain.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.